Paulo, welcome to Talk Python Me. Welcome to Talk Python Me. Great to have you here, man.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me and meeting you again after PyCon US last week.
Yeah, we had a great time at PyCon. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, given all the work that you do. I suspect you feel similarly, but to me, PyCon is like my geek holiday. It doesn't feel like work. It's like the reward for all the work throughout the year.
Yeah, so for me, it's very nice to meet in person all these people that you talk with during the year, and then finally, for a work week, you can chat with them, drink a beer together, or meeting also new people.
Yeah, absolutely. It was tons of fun. So we're going to talk about, honestly, I think it's going to be a fad, but we're going to talk about this new fad called AI. It's probably not going to last, but in the meantime, it's kind of a hot topic at the moment. So we're going to talk about AI and specifically your talk from PyCon about the effect of AI on open source maintainers, which I think is a perspective that many people don't consider, right? There was this graph from GitHub saying like, look, we're really sorry that GitHub is down a lot lately, but here is the usage graph of GitHub, and it did something like 12 times increase in activity over a couple of months. I don't know, which I'm not necessarily totally going to give GitHub a pass on that. But it is a signal and an indicator of just how much more the contributions, issues, pull requests are to GitHub. Some of those are going to private repos or public one-person repos, but some of that traffic is going towards Django, Flask, Postgres, curl, whatever, right? And there's still one person or a couple of people on the receiving ends of those projects.
Yeah, it's true. As I've said during my talk, I think AI here is a tool that amplified all the contribution, positive and negative effects. So also small project or one-man project now have tons and tons of pull requests and issue opened in a very few amount of time. This is not the best thing to have if you have a very few time as a maintainer or you have also a job and a family. So this is what I try to analyze in my talk.
It's tricky. It's very tricky. Now, before we get into a bunch of different things, primarily your talk, who are you? Quick introduction for everyone.
Yeah, very quick one. I'm a software engineer from Italy. I studied in Bologna, and just after my career in the university, I started working with Python, which I never used at university, but I started using Zope, which is a very old web framework from the 2000. And also, I think Guido worked in the Zope corporation back in the time. But I liked a lot the backend work with database, relational database in particular. So I jumped from the clone community and Zope community in the Django one in 2011. And I've been more and more involved until today that I'm a member of the Django Software Foundation. I'm a Python Software Foundation fellow, and I try to involve in the various initiatives like PyCon Italia organization. I founded the local Python Pescara in my city local meetup, and I try to talk about Python different conferences in person and remotely. This
Nice. Well, that will keep you busy. That's a
yeah.
lot going on. Let's actually just let me switch over here. Let's just jump right into that. I think maybe talking about some of your work. You mentioned some of these in your introduction here, but people are probably familiar with the Python Software Foundation, but when you switch from Plone and Zope over to Django, you move to a place that has an incredible community.
Yeah.
It's probably the biggest community or like organized community in all of Python. That's not Python itself. Maybe something in data science, but I don't think so. I think Django has got the most gravity of all of these different organizations. So it has its own software foundation with people that work for the Django Software Foundation and so on. So you're the director of Django Software Foundation, yes?
Yeah, I think
tell us about it.
Django, last year we had the 20th birthday, so it's 20 year around now. This year 21. So one of the oldest community that now is organized. They created the foundation from the beginning, so now it's one of the few projects with a big foundation, also a big community, and we organize DjangoCon since long time now in different country, in US, in Europe, in Africa, in Australia. We are starting also some initiative like that in India. And the foundation here are the role to preserve the community and the software. I think the Django Software Foundation is one of the most interesting because we experiment a lot of solution also before the Python Software Foundation. For example, we started having the Django Fellow long time ago, and now the Python Foundation has the developer in residence, which is the same things. We try to be involved in various initiative. We sustain the conference, the event as a Django Software Foundation. For example, we give money for the organization of Django Girls workshop all around the world. Now we are sustaining the Django Not Space program, which has been the subject of the topic of the last keynote in PyCon US last week, and other small initiative like events or Django on Demand. So the goal of the foundation is to sustain the community, the various aspects of the community, and also have higher. Now we have 3 Django Fellow that can be full-time working in triaging, helping the community to having the best code. We can have released the version on Python of Django, sorry. And yeah, this is the work we try to do every month.
It's amazing, really. You think about it. There's a lot of other Python web frameworks. They don't have this. You know what I mean? There's a lot of data science groups, and they have it. You know, there's PyData. So in a sense, it's somewhat, but that's all of PyData. It's not, pandas or whatever, right? So this is really impressive, and I think it's honestly one of the bits of the secret to the success of Django.
Yeah, I agree. The fact that we had people that can dedicate full time or volunteers in the board. We all are volunteer and they spend times during the week and then for the meeting to sustain all the working group we are having now. We try to defend the trademark of Django and sustain all the working group that we are now for the security part and for other things. So the goal here is trying to be organized a little to let everyone join the community and stay inside the community of Django.
Right. You're also not that one. I don't think I have a link for it, but you're a Django Girls coach as well. What does that mean? I mean, we know what Django Girls is. It's like an organization that specifically supports women in tech by helping them get good at Django and providing community there. But what does it mean to be a coach for Django Girls?
Yeah, Django Girls is an initiative that started in EuroPython more than 10 years ago, if I remember correctly, or longer than that. So they are workshop that for one whole day, and you invited girls and also low representative people in this workshop for free. And being a coach there means only stay there with the people that join and help them through the process of completing the workshop. There is a very good guide a lot of people can do at home, but being there for them, it means starting creating a human connection with people, demonstrating them that the community is not only code, but it's also person. And I also organized 2 of these, other than being coach here in Pescara. The goal is to organize more of that. And if you go on the website, you see that every weeks, a lot of these workshops happen everywhere in the world, from Australia to US, Europe, Africa, everywhere.
Yeah, very nice. I think that's something that's super important for people to learn earlier, that there's more than just the code and there's more than just the docs and compiler or runtime errors and warnings and stuff like that. The stereotype of a software developer, someone who is kind of antisocial, just sits there and, holds themselves up in a basement or whatever. And really it's a team sport. And I think that's coming back around to PyCon. I think that's why PyCon is so interesting, because you put a face to the name and you realize, oh, there's all these people doing this and making this possible. It's not just this, pip install this package or whatever.
Totally true. Python is a community-driven language, but it means that there is a whole community that sustains everyone.
100%. Now, something else that Django has that's pretty interesting is Django Knots. Django at djangonauts.space. I had Sarah Boyce and Tushar Gupta on a while ago to dive deep into this, but this is a really interesting idea as well. And I think this, pulling this up specifically, because I think it relates, it starts to get into the space of where your talk actually lands, right? So
yeah,
when I first heard this, I thought, oh, this is to help people get good at Django. But really, that's not exactly what it is it?
Yeah, I remember seeing the first presentation of the program. I was very impressed. So if the Django Girls program help people that do know anything about programming start doing that, this program wants to answer the question of people that already know how to program in Python or in Django, how to start be more involved and start contributing back to the code of Django in particular, or other projects. Now we added in the footer, you can see Beware, Wigtail, other initiative very connected with Python and Django. So the goal here is to have a small group of people with a navigator that can help them to start contributing, start reading an issue from the issue tracker, understanding how to contribute in the best effective way, and to help them do the steps with other people that already did it. And it's an accelerator for people that want to contribute back. I was part of that once as a navigator, and that's been a very great experience. And they organize more than one per year, one session per year, and it was great seeing all these people coming for the program and then staying to start contributing effectively. You can track them on the code base or in the blog of Django, all these places that they contribute now.
Yeah. And they go in, I forgot what they're called, but like cohorts or whatever, right? It goes for a certain period of time. And then you apply to be part of the cohort, and then the cohort runs, and so on. So people out there can go apply. It's free, right? You just have to get accepted.
Yeah, a lot of people apply. There is a review of the application. So the admins form a small group of 4 people, of 3 or 4 people with a navigator that can help them. And then there is a period of 6 weeks while they meet once in a while. They can vote each other because they have a chat, and they have a way to track all the things that learn. They attempt to contribute, and they are together as a team for this part of the year, helping them each other and having feedback. Without a lot of initiative during this period, like talks and meeting online, way to have support also for things that happen in life. It's a small version of what can happen for real the whole community. When you meet people, you not talk only about the code. Sometimes you talk about what happens in life, job, other multiple things. This is a small version of it.
Nice. There's at least people who are junior developers or earlier stage developers. I think there's a pretty real challenge of getting a job right now. And contributing to open source is certainly one of those areas that helps you stand above, certainly on a popular project like Django. If you go around and say, yeah, I'm a Django core developer, contributor, or whatever, that would make a big difference, right? So I think projects like this, people are really super excited. Maybe this is a good opportunity to put another feather in the cap or something good on the resume,
Yeah, every time I met some newcomers in the community, also in my job, every time I push them to try to contribute back. It's good in your resume if you can show that you contributed, but more than that, you learn so much in contributing to Django, respect of only using Django in your daily job, because you are forced to go in the internals of Django with the help of the core contributors. You can work also in one of the biggest company, but it's impossible that you have so many skilled Django contributor or Python contributor when you contribute directly with the code. And it's a fastest way to improve as a developer. And it's more important than having something to put in your CV. I think you learn. It's an accelerator of your learning. So
yeah, I've seen multiple people who come out of university or other things like that, gotten onto an open source project, and it's just skyrocketed their career, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, last thing before we dive into your main topic is PyCon Italy organizer. And this is coming, first of all, I love the website design. It looks very fun, but it's coming up really soon, basically 5 days from now from recording. So people, I think this episode will actually come out after that in terms of on the podcast channels, but on the YouTube channel, at least, we can encourage people to attend if they're local, somewhat local, or want to just go to Italy for a few days.
Yeah. So I started, PyCon Italy is of course my preferred conference because it's the first one that I started attending a long time ago. And after a while, decided to be involved and help other organizers to organize it. It will happen next year after a long time being organized in Florence. Last year we moved in Bologna, and now we have a wider venue. So last year we had more than 1,000 people.
Wow,
90% of the talk, it's quite big. 90% of the talk are in English. The keynote, the workshop, we have multiple tracks, I think 6 tracks plus the workshop and the keynotes. We usually organize social events like drinks and dinner with local food, of course, from Italy. And we have the same approach as other community-driven conference like PyCon US or EuroPython, but we give a lot of importance to maybe the lunchtime. We've spent 2 hours for having lunch because we think it's a way to network better with other people with proper food and wine and other things. You see, we have very great keynoters. The one you are showing from different community. Diego is on the PyCon core team. Sarah is one Django fellow, and Don is involved in community in so many different things, PyLadies and other things. And we try to attract a lot of people from Europe. Usually, a lot of people from Europe and US attend because they can then spend other days traveling around in Italy, which is not bad. And Bologna this year and also last year is a way to be the central part of Italy and traveling very easy to all the other part of Italy. Like you can go in Florence in 30 minutes by train. The train system will work very well.
Nice.
We have the first day, which is open and free for everyone. So if people listen in YouTube and want to join, they don't have a ticket or they cannot afford it. The first day is a day for the beginners. There is workshop for free for everyone. You only have to go there and show up without a ticket. It's a way to bring people, start attending a conference like that, participate in Django Girls workshop or other workshop. Okay, can help you be more involved. And of course, if you understand only now that you cannot attend because it's too late, you can join us next year because we for sure we will have the same enthusiasm, the same great people.
That sounds great. Do you have a mailing list or something people can sign up for?
Yeah, I think it's in the contact here in the website. On the footer, you can join there, and there is the group on Telegram. There are the mail for be contacted.
There we go.
We can share maybe the link in the description of the podcast.
Perfect. Yeah, well,
and
we can send the link.
Yeah. And of course, if your company is interested, you can sponsor the conference, because there are a lot of opportunities to meet people, hire developer, and or connect with other communities. So
indeed,
great.
Yeah, very cool. All right, let's talk about your talk here.
Perfect.
Yeah, let's dive into it. So your talk was AI assisted contributions and maintainer load over here at PyCon, and there's your selfie getting ready. That's cool.
Yeah, I did it at the last moment before closing with Simon Willison, that was the host of the AI track.
Yeah. So this was definitely in the AI. I thought it was cool they had an AI track, right?
Yeah, it was the first one in the track.
There was a security track and an AI track, and I'll tell you what, the AI track was packed. There was a lot of people in those talks, so I thought that was really cool. Yeah. So tell us a bit about your talk, and then we can dive into. You had a bunch of like pull quotes, little examples from different maintainers and luminaries and so on. So I thought we could kind of talk through those as a way of covering the topic. But tell people a bit about high level about your talk.
Yeah. So the idea for the talk came to me when I started seeing more and more contribution in the Django project or Python or connected projects, open source project in general. Since last year, I started seeing more and more contribution, very strange, too big or too wide as a scope, and maintainers start complaining about it. And I collected tons of them. Then I selected a few to show in the here in the talk. The point was that using AI is a good thing. It can be a good thing. It's a tool that can improve your productivity during the day if you know how to use it. But can be also bad things for maintainers that have to filter and review more pull requests than before, more issue or bigger pull requests without having in the other side someone that know what they are sending to you, because they can create a lot of code very easily, but maybe if they are not careful, they cannot understand what they are proposing to merge. And in the process of this month, the past year, I was seeing that this was accelerating. It was accelerating a lot from very few. I
found that graph on GitHub, and you cannot imagine a more vertical increase in usage. I'll put this in a link in the show notes for people, but it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And that's what the maintainers are experiencing.
Exactly. So I was collecting all this information, realizing that it was accelerating. So after collecting a lot of them, also because in the Django community, we were observing this amount of pull requests. Then I started seeing in different projects, and we started reasoning on how to face this amount of pull requests. We created our working group in the Django community for the AI. We started doing some workshop, and I wanted to share what was happening. I don't share any solution how to face it, but it was interesting to share what was happening and what different projects were doing to face it.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. Yeah. So let's go through. I think we can. You're a big fan of movies. I can tell. You have a lot of movie quotes and
the
Space Odyssey and other ones. I introduced
Yeah,
my
yeah.
daughter to the concept of HAL and the Space Odyssey when she first learned about AI, and she thought it was the most amazing thing.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So let's see. Here we go. All right. So the first quote comes from Ken. Which Ken is this? Do you remember?
Ken Thompson was the
Yeah, Ken Thompson.
co-creator
That's right.
of Unix.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And so the quote is, "You can't trust code that you did not totally create yourself." I think this is an interesting way to start this conversation
Yeah.
because this comes from a time far before open source, right? Unix was created quite a while ago, and there's something true to this. But I also think you can't necessarily trust code that you did write yourself
Yeah,
for
this is true.
complicated systems. And I think we've seen that you can actually trust code in the right systems with the right guardrails. Like look at Django, for example. Most of the code that you run when you run Django, even if you're a core developer, you yourself didn't write, right? I mean, Simon Willison and
It's
a
true.
few other folks who created it, even they probably didn't write most of the Django code at the way it is today, right?
Yeah. Today, you can still find some code that they wrote, but now there are so many contributors. Yeah, I showed these quotes and also the previous one, not because I think they were totally right in general, but to show people that the fear of new technology has been something in our community that started from the beginning of open source, from the late 70s. And it is normal that when a new technology like AI show up, the first reaction can be both refusing it totally or maybe to embrace it because it's something exciting and new. And I wanted to show that some quotes from the past apply also perfectly today from some reaction we are seeing in the community. Uh,
Yeah, it's a good quote, and I like the idea of you putting it there. It's easy to feel like this is a brand new problem in some ways, and it is a brand new problem, but not entirely, right? These ideas have been there before, and open source was revolutionary when it came out.
yeah,
Yeah,
I agree
and
totally.
not just in the fact that it made a big change, but as it was kind of overthrowing some of the ideas of how software should be built, sold, shared, licensed, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I think the open source preserved the beginning of computer science as a science discipline, because before them the science was sharing everything with everyone in every part of the world and discussing it. And before companies started closing part of the code, they decided to continue that track and continue to sharing as much as possible. And this is what brings us today discussing open source languages or framework.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. There's the obligatory
Yeah,
single developer Nebraska Lego block or Jinja, not Jinja.
Jenga.
What is that? Jenga. Thank you. There's
Jenga.
Django, Jinja, Tower for that game where you pull the
Yeah,
blocks out and you try to get a minimal block. But yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah, I
this
use
this
this
is
image
yeah. Go ahead.
because talking about maintainers, this is an image that can totally represent the situation here. We are also Python and Django are a very small amount of contribution compared to the amount of people that use Python in the world, or Django. They are 100 times more or more, 1,000 times more. So I highlighted these two words because you can put there, instead of Nebraska, your hometown or your project that you like the most, that you contribute to, and it's work the same.
I think this is the majority of open source projects, and it's interesting how some of them are so central. We're going to come back to talk about curl a little bit later, I think, and
Yeah,
that's one of them. We had, what was it? OpenSSL, I think, was one that really felt, maybe inspired this diagram, actually. I can't exactly remember, but yeah. And that's why I kind of talked so much about Django and the DSF and stuff. Is it's true there's not that many people relative to how many are using it, but it's actually quite a bit more than most projects that do look like this. And so when you start swamping that little peg at the end with 15,000 line PRs, just fixes a minor problem, just optimizes. Here you go. It's just too much, right?
Exactly.
All right. You had this interesting analogy with a picture of Django, the guitar player, and there was a lot of funny, and this is the AI generator one, right? So there's a lot of interesting things that came up when you said, make me such a picture, right? You want to talk us through this analogy real quick?
Yeah. So to show how AI can impact the project I contribute more, which is Django, I say, okay, let's try to ask AI to improve the image of Django Reinhardt, which is the jazz guitarist that inspired the name of Django, the framework. And asking the AI to improve the picture, it did different things that is very a metaphor of what it can do to your code too. For example, you bring a very new guitar, which is something that AI usually do when you try to modernize your code or use AI in your code. It usually brings new packages or new things. Maybe your code is very old, but it brings new dependencies, the latest technologies. The other things the AI changed was removing some bad parts, like, for example, the smoking cigarette that was common at the time when the picture originally were taken, but nowadays we know that it maybe cannot be so a good things. And it did also a strange things that took me a few times to see, was adding an additional finger in the hand of Django Reinhardt, which is strange. Is the metaphor of the code you can have generated from the AI that at first look it seems normal, but when you deep dive a bit, you understand that it is something that was not possible, like having, in this case, an additional finger.
It's a really good analogy. Yeah, you're like,
Yeah,
oh, look, this is a great, I can't believe how perfect, look, everything looks so, wait a minute. But that's also true for AI contributions as well, is it looks
totally.
fine. I found that's also true actually for speech to text. It's really, I broke my hand really badly, like in 3 places up and down my hand, and I don't know, quite a while ago, but 7 or 8 years. But I was still running CPython and the business I still get, but I had an insane amount of email and stuff I had to do to keep things going. And so I had to use speech to text. And I think the reason I bring this up is I think it's a bit of an interesting analogy for AI as well. As I would use speech to text, it would transcribe it, and then I would go to send it, and I had the hardest time actually finding the grammar errors. But I would say stuff like, we're going to look at their project and figure some, and it would use the different kind of there, right? Not the belonging to the person, but the location there. But because it was phonetically correct, I would read it back and it would sound okay. And it was just something about my brain couldn't find the problem. So I had to put a footer in my email like, sorry, I hurt my hand, have to do voice to text. Please just forgive the mistakes. I couldn't find a point where I could get it down to 0 mistakes. And nowadays, probably the transcription would be quite a bit better. But there's something about looking at it and it looks right and it sounds right, but it's not right. That just makes it very hard to internalize the mistake,
Totally true. AI is very great in generating content that look like perfect when you see at first glance, but when you deep dive a bit, especially for code, you can find that one small characters can change the meaning of the things. And a lot of people, when I show this picture, didn't realize at the first glance that this is an additional finger on the picture, because it seems very, very nice at the beginning. Yeah.
The most subtle thing for me is the amplifier. honestly.
Yeah. That was interesting. I use it as a metaphor because I say that beginning AI can amplify the effect of so many things. I use it then in the rest of my talk to say a lot of projects already recognize AI as a tool. It can amplify a lot of effect. You have to be aware that it can amplify positive and negative effect on your code.
Yeah, it's an amplifier, but what is it amplifying, right? This is an amazing analogy. Now,
Yeah.
people who know me know that I certainly am on the positive side of working with AI, especially the newer agentic ones. I think you can do really incredible stuff, not necessarily discussing the environmental and copyright aspects, but just as a tool, I think it's absolutely incredible. But I think it's also really important to acknowledge its weaknesses, where you have to put in guardrails, how you should use it, right? And I think this is a good analogy for it. Okay. Yeah, amplifier. So if you got low quality code, maybe it just really like makes way more of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or bad
So
decisions. Yeah.
recognizing the fact that AI is a very good tool that can amplify positive and negative things is something real thing. I use AI every day for my daily job, but I can recognize the fact that people can use it in a bad way, and so open tons of pull requests that are bad for your project. So we have to be realistic here and to see that maybe it can be used correctly. Everyone won't do that, but it's not every time the case. So
Yeah. We're going to get into the different projects that do and some of their policies or whatever. And some of
yeah,
them are just no. I think that's a little bit short-sighted, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So you put out there that AI does not change the nature of open source; it changes the scale.
yeah. This was my thought when I, for the first time, worked on the slides for what I was observing. Then I changed a bit this idea because when I spoke with people, I realized it was slightly different because I presented this talk at DjangoCon Europe in Athens in April, 1 month ago, and I received this very interesting feedback. One of them was the fact that maybe changing the scale of the contribution of the amplifying things, AI was a tool that was able to change the nature of open source, because if you cannot trust people that open up requests, if you lose your trust in other members that are involved because they are too much, so they contribute in a bad way, open source will change. So you have to be aware of that, I think.
Yeah. One of my, I don't know, rule of thumbs or whatever, like sort of AI ethics, I guess, is it shouldn't take you less time to create a thing than it takes someone else to review that thing. It shouldn't take you less time to create a thing than it takes someone else to just read a thing, right? But I imagine there's a lot of people out there who are just, oh, I got this great idea for Django or whatever, open source project. Make it for me, and then I'll submit it as a PR. And did they test it? Did they verify it? Did they work on dry principles of refactoring everything just right? Some people absolutely, and that's the challenge. You don't want to throw that away necessarily, but a lot of times I think they just see it works and test pass maybe and send it.
One of the projects I show later in the talk stated in the guideline exactly what you just said, that if your pull request required less effort and has reviewing it, so we throw away the contribution because can be a waste of time. It's good that we can use this tool to vibe code things, so to create demo locally for ourselves, but contributing and deploying it in production is a different things, I think.
Now, you put an example from OCaml that says there was somebody did a PR with 13,323 lines added, 30 or changed, and 36 lines removed. No issue, just drop the pull request, right? Like that's problematic.
I think this is, I tried to show some examples starting from the beginning to show how it escalated. So this is one of the first I saw in November, a few months ago, was one of the first with a proper discussion that people talk about. So this pull request was created without any discussion from someone that was involved in the project, and they closed it, of course, because it was impossible to review.
It doesn't have to be this way, you know? You could go to your AI and say, I want to add this feature. Your job is to minimally add the absolute minimum amount of changes to the code such that this feature works or whatever, right? Like just as if you were a developer. You don't going to reformat the entire project in your different formatter and then just change a bunch of other things, right? But again, I think it's the amplification, the amplifier that you talked about. The person who did this PR doesn't understand contributing to open source. They may understand software, but not working on a team sort of thing, right?
Exactly. In fact, they were forced to close the discussion of this because it was.
That's right. It says something like, I have the impression that this conversation is becoming less productive, so I'll move ahead and lock the topic. It's because it's just out of control, right? Yeah, absolutely. Godot was another.
Yeah, these things escalated from one single pull request to a lot of them. So in only 3 months from the previous example to this one, I saw in the months that there was escalated. In this case, they created so many slow pull requests for this project that they were exhausted, and they put out in the social this emergency.
Yeah, I'll throw out another example because I want to come back to it as a counter example. But this is does not disprove or devalue it. The maintainer of curl, I think Daniel Stenberg, I believe, he's become something of a poster child for maintainer abuse, I think, because he's written a lot about it, and curl is so popular. But they had a bug bounty program, which is slightly different than accepting PRs, but it's still accepting contributions from people. And this bug bounty program was out there to help find bugs in curl, which is really important, and you get paid for it. And the motivation to contribute to Godot or OCaml is like, hey, I get my name listed as a contributor. That's great. Or I just get a feature I want. But for the bug bounty, you got money. So that thing just got absolutely swamped to the point where they canceled. I don't know if they canceled the bug bounty, but they certainly took away the financial reward for it, right? That's pretty bad.
Yeah, I thought that the project was facing this problem. I can say that also Django used this type of program, and we starting seeing more and more issue when they try to modify things or the environment of some very old bug, trying to find edge cases for the main goal to have a rewarding from that, but the issue were not real. We're only trying to force some strange cases when the code behaved like that. And we saw something like that also when there was some initiative like Oktoberfest or similar, where people in the past tried to open a very small pull request with a typo only to have some rewards from that.
I really disliked Oktoberfest. I mean, I have a bunch of GitHub repositories. I looked the other day. I have some like 390 GitHub repositories, but a much smaller portion are actual projects that people can use, mostly web stuff. But even for these little tiny projects that have a couple hundred stars, I would get PRs like, there was a problem with your README, I fixed it, and they'll like change an adjective from like quickly to fastly or something. I'm like, no, I am not playing your, I contributed and got a PR accepted game. And I was just like, why do we need this? this is not in the spirit of it, and it's not. It's just not right. So, I can only imagine with AI now what it's like.
Yeah, and this is the main motivation because we, as I said before, we started a project like Django Not Space to help people to properly contribute to a project, not only fix a typo to have a reward. It can be a t-shirt or money. It's not how open source work.
Yeah, for sure. Jazzband. This is another project that I don't know if this is what directly caused such a problem, but it might have been the final straw. So tell us about Jazzband.
Yeah, so Janice was the creator of Jazzband, was also now in the board of PSF, contributed in the Django ecosystem for so long time, and they created this very good project where people can go and self-maintain projects in a direct and democratic way, and was very effective. There is a lot of projects that are very well used, like the Django debug toolbar, but also not specific for Django, like pip-tools that I personally use for long times, was very effective to generate your log file. You can do today with UV-log, for example.
Yeah, I was on team. I'm on team pip-tools as well. I love that thing.
Perfect. I used for so many times. I like the fact that you were able to create your log file locally and don't have any additional dependencies on production, only installing it with pips. So in this context, Jazzband was the containers that hosted all these projects, maintained. But more and more, he has issues with the lack of maintainers, lack of time of people, having more and more contribution opened. So in this case, some issues were already there in the project. Maintaining maybe moved to do other things in the meantime, but the AI accelerated, amplified the process suddenly, having the slope of pull requests. This project accelerated the process to sunset. And in fact, Janice wrote directly here in the article, I extracted only that part that was useful for the slide, but at a certain point, he writes clearly that was the slow apocalypse, as he wrote here, and then they decided to sunset the project.
Yeah, that's too bad. I think it's really interesting, the timing of this, because you said you use AI at work. I definitely do as well. And I think recently it has gotten so incredibly good. I would encourage people to absolutely use the very best model that you can afford to do your work, and especially if you're going to do a PR or something. I think a lot of the challenges is the AIs were not as good, and I think people would say, "Oh, I'll just use. I don't want to wait, so I'll use this fast one, or I don't want to spend that much money on it, so I'll use Haiku rather than Opus or something like that." And coming back around to curl, Daniel Stenberg recently wrote a new post called "High Quality Chaos," saying there's not really much more AI slop. Actually, he said, I complained and complained about the high frequency junk submissions to the curl bug bounty program. In March, once again, something like said, the slop situation is not a problem anymore. Actually has graphs of like percent of slop, which is a really interesting thing. But it's just the amount of contributions, even though they're finding real issues, is like out of control. So even if you have all of this stuff coming in, how are you going to deal with it? So I think partly this is just speculation on my part. I'd love to hear what you think as well. But I think this slop apocalypse is a little bit fading, but it's just left such a sour taste in the mouth of so many maintainers that now they see AI, they're just like, no. That puts aside the thing of like 13,000 lines of PR, which is just also no. But what is your thought on the kind of legacy of older AI versus newer AI? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I thought it was interesting that Daniel Stenberg kind of like was so against it. And I was like, I'm against it, but for no reason now.
Yeah, it's It remembers me reading the Hackers for Stephen Levy, the books from the 80s, when he wrote about the beginning of hackers in the original meaning and the open source context. The story was that at the beginning, at the initial teams or university, they started creating code and sharing with each other without any license at all or very freely. And then someone show up and started applying some license on it and started to sell this code. So they faced in that moment, they realized that some type of new things was needed, like open source license, and started using it. We are now in a similar situation when until yesterday was enough to have the process of having pull requests and trust each other. Now, with this amount of pull requests, it's not enough. This mechanism, we have to find something new to try to filter better the amount of contribution. The tool is not bad per se, is the way people are using it. And maybe it's changing because when you have your new toys, you want to try with everything, you start creating things. After a while, you realize the best way to use it. So maybe now people are more aware of how to use properly AI or LLM. So people are improving, but still we need some way to collect or to handle better this new.
Yeah, I agree. In your research, did you find something I haven't seen a lot from, and I'm wondering if you found it, is did you find people using AI as a first level analysis before they even looked at it? So were people setting up AI bots on like the GitHub or other work and say a CI flow to analyze the PR for certain criteria before they even have to look at it? I feel like, I mean, there's like Code Rabbit and some other things.
I saw many different ways to use it.
I'm not, this is not a recommendation, by the way. I just, it's just something that I've heard of that's sort of in that space, you know?
Yeah, I remember seeing multiple ways to use AI. Someone, of course, proposed to use AI to analyze AI contribution.
Like turn it against themselves. Like if there's AI slop coming in, like get an AI guardian that just battles it back, you know?
Yeah, it can work. It can also work very bad for us if it is not working properly. More and more, I'm seeing project experimenting, trying to have different approach of this problem. For example, I remember seeing a project from Armin Ronacher, the original creator of Flask. Don't remember exactly the project he was experimenting it, but the thing was to close every pull request. That's the first thing. They close every pull request, and they ask the creator to open and trying to explain, so in some way why it's worth it reopening it. For some reason, the AI was not good at doing this stuff, and so in this way, they recognized that people were effectively interacting, not a bot, for example.
Yeah,
and
it's like a GitHub reCAPTCHA for
exactly, exactly was an experiment. Another interesting one is, do you know Granian, the server written in Rust for Whiskey?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had Giovanni on the show to talk about it, and it also powers TalkPython and the courses and stuff. So yeah, I definitely know it.
And the maintainer was I listening in some interview, and he said that he was using AI after they merged the commit. He went back in time to the previous point of the code and asked the AI to create the same feature for them, and they analyze the difference between what was the quality of code created by AI and what was merged, to have some sort of comparison to see how good was the work of core contributor that know very well the code. So I had so many different experiments, and I'm not sure one of these is the best of the others, but it's interesting that people are experimenting. with it.
Yeah. I think we're still finding our way. Yeah, I think we're still finding our way.
Yeah.
Speaking of finding our way, I want to talk about this next. So Marietta just announced new guidelines for using AI tools when contributing to CPython. Thank you, Paulo, for pointing me at this morning. So this came out, I don't know, what's the time on this? Day and a half ago, something like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. Is this the link? No. This says the person submitting an issue or PR is responsible for its content, regardless of whether AI tools were used in its creation. Generative AI tools can produce output quickly, but discretion, good judgment, critical thinking are the foundation of all good contributions. We value good code, concise, accurate documentation, and well-scoped PRs without the unneeded code churn. It goes on with details about acceptable use and other things. What's, I think, noteworthy here is that it's not just no, we will not accept AI generated PRs. It's you have to use good engineering regardless of the tools, right?
I showed multiple examples of guidelines or API and AI policy in different projects, and the Python one was the first one, the first level. When I used it, they was slightly different, but the meaning is exactly the same. You are responsible for what you contribute. You can use different tools, and AI is a tools as another one. So, but still, the responsibility is yours when you contribute. And this is one of the first level of strictness or guidelines I found. It's important that they state the fact that they consider AI as another tool and not a person. And you can use it, but you have to do consciously.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. Another one is over here. There's this article on RedMonk by Kate Holterhoff called The Generative AI Policy Landscape in Open Source. And this is much broader. It says she compiled and analyzed the generative AI policies of 86 open source foundations, including organizations, including foundations like the Linux Foundation, Apache Eclipse, Kernel, Curl, Matplotlib, and so on. And then there's this bunch of graphs and stuff of about 55% said permissive, we allow it. 25% said banned instantly. Some were undecided. You've seen this too, right? What are your thoughts on this? It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I saw it. The article is from 4 or 5 months ago. So, and what I was observing was the fact that it was changing every week. Every week there are new projects, or like we just saw, the Python project changed a bit the guidelines about AI, and so are doing all the other. Extrapolated from this, some of project analyze. Other than that, here you see there are a majority of projects that are permissive. What I did is to analyze how permissive they were in the same context. So from Python to Arch or FastAPI or Matplotlib, there are different shades of permission level they guaranteed to the contributor. Only one project that I found was no contribution, no AI contribution at all. The other one were slightly different each other, and I try to show how can be slightly different between every different project.
I think a really interesting part of this report is there's a different reason. They asked the different projects, what reasons do you have for either having a policy or having a ban? And they broke it down by quality, copyright, and ethics. And certainly it looks like the biggest area is just quality. Like there is ethics is, some of them are high and some of them are low, right? There's some debate there. Copyright is maybe in the middle, but certainly quality is where people seem to like, well, ethics aside, just like it doesn't give me good stuff is what people said they were worried about.
Yeah, I also think they are connected a lot of time. What we do here is to have high qualities in maintaining good connection between projects. So ethics and copyright is also a way to maintain high quality. It's not only how fast can be your code in executing, it is also how fast you can exchange with other projects we are using. You usually use a stack of layers in your project when you deploy it. If you
Yeah.
can interact better with others, it's the better.
I do wonder how much of this is old opinion versus new opinion. The reports, when is the report published? Although it's been updated, like published and updated. It's February 26th, 2026. That's not super old, but the report was written now, but the people's opinion from, say, Ashi Linux may have been formed 2 years ago, right? Like in terms of the quality bar, like I don't think ethics or copyright really changes meaningfully over that time period, but I think the quality may. So it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we're getting short on time. I think maybe let's wrap this up with two things. I'm going to include some levity, a joke at the end for people that they can appreciate, because I think it's good. But let's sort of have you close things out with just give what advice you have for maintainers, and all this research, you've studied a lot of it, you've lived in the space a lot. So what do you think? What do you say to folks out there?
Yeah, what I'd say that exactly at the end of my talk is that we have to consider this AI as a new tools, maybe very powerful, that we can use and we have to use properly. It can change the scale of your project. And the things we need more is having more human in the loop to face all these things, like be connected more and more in community, like we did PyCon US. More and more when I met people in PyCon US, people asked to be in a channel together to discuss these type of things. Another example I show was to start collaborating more closely between person of the community. And for example, we are just starting now with Carton Gibson the experiment to have small Django sprints. We named it Django on Demand. We had an experiment edition last year in Spain. In September, we will have another one here where I live in Pescara on the Adriatic Sea. And we want to create a format that people can replicate elsewhere, to meet in person, to share their personal thoughts and idea about how to use properly these new tools and how to manage it. So I think the secret here is to be more connected with your community, which is the most important value of your project. AI can produce code. The things that AI cannot produce is connection between people. It's impossible to generate that. You only have to create in person or directly also online, but directly with other people that, like we are doing now here, speaking each other. And this is the best thing we can continue doing, creating connection, speaking, because it's the only way to find a solution, a better solution, experimenting together and evolving as a community, as a project. This is the point, I think.
Yeah, very nice. I certainly want to encourage people out there to think before they just fire off a AI-based PR,
Yeah.
Maybe open an issue and have a conversation about it. Is this what you want? What exactly you want with it? And then, kind of like the Python and CPython guidelines recommended. All right, I want to leave the audience with something fun here for this this conversation. Just as a bit of a joke, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, too much AI, I believe Glyph turned me on to this. This German guy does incredible videos, and this one is called "Senior Engineer Tries Vibe Coding." Have you seen this, Paulo?
No, it's first time. I'm curious.
Oh, you have to watch it. It's absolutely golden. It's, this guy is just like got a towel, like he's working out too much, and we've tried this for 4.5 days now. I'm not even getting paid. We're going to do the UI over again, but it's just you'll really appreciate it if you've worked with AI and it's been
Yeah, I have to check it for sure.
yeah. So I'll leave that in the show notes for everyone as a bit of a way to lighten the mood and enjoy it. But I don't know. Let's get your final thoughts on AI going forward in the world of open source. How do you see it shaping up?
Yeah, my final thought is you have to track it as a tool and be more connected with other people to exchange as many interesting things you can do with this tool without living high at other people. The only way you can improve this field is together with other people. So experiment it, share your thoughts the more you can, and it is the best way you can improve.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like there is an engineering skill that is different than the engineering skills we had before, and a lot of people just see it as a chat box, and without looking at it and applying it as a practice of engineering, you end up with a lot of the junk, and you end up with this like joke video we got here. So I just encourage people to treat this as a serious skill, not just a chat box that's supposed to understand every nuanced thing you ask for.
Yeah, and don't trust something or someone that say that you're absolutely right every time. So.
Oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. This has absolutely been a great episode. Thank you, Paulo.
Thank you for having me, and goodbye for everyone.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.